Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. As you guys may know from my previous video about Seinfeld, I am a huge fan of Seinfeld. It has been one of my favorite shows for as long as I can remember. I have very strong feelings of when we used to watch it when I was growing up. Every Thursday, I think, was the must-see TV on NBC when, the family would crowd around the TV and we'd watch the show, and I wouldn't get a lot of it, I was pretty young, but my family loved it. I grew up loving it. And, on top of the nostalgia, I think it's still a timeless kind of classic show with a lot of nostalgic factor to it. A lot of relatability, and it's just funny. I think it's just funny. It's a show, I've said before, you can just enjoy. There's a lot of comedies that make you want to feel more. There's comedies that have tried to go deeper and turn into dramas, and when I want to watch a comedy, I just want to watch a comedy. And that might be simple of me, but I do enjoy just laughing and having a good time. This show had 9 seasons. Now, the first season was arguably just kind of a pilot season and very short, very different, very unique to the franchise. The following season, season 2, is kind of where they started figuring out the characters a little more, seeing who the audience liked and everything like that, and the writing took a little more of a turn, giving everybody a story versus just kind of, George and Jerry stories. And we're going to talk about season 1 and 2. Season 1 and 2 are so short that I'm able to kind of combine them into one video, and we'll talk about every episode. I'll rank them and then discuss kind of a little bit about them, what makes them great, what they were kind of lacking, and how they fit into the rest of the series. If you guys have a list for this season or any memories or anything you agree or disagree with, please, as always, let me know in them comments, talk about it. There's no right or wrong answer, all these episodes are subjective. There's a lot of value in this. The problem with this show, I'll just say, is that I love it. It's very good all the way through. So it's hard to say, oh, this is my least favorite of this, because your least favorite of your favorite things is still going to be up there with your favorite things, And we see that in music all the time, but, TV, music, food, whatever it is. Like, we see that in various things. But like I say, there's no right or wrong answer. This is just a subjective kind of discussion. I'm just kind of go through my thought process here and talk about it as always. And you know what? Thank you all for being here. I appreciate you. We're going to get into this one right now. So at number 17, there are 17 episodes in the first and second season. Right off the bat, we got to go to the Seinfeld Chronicles. Number 1, the first episode ever made, the pilot episode. We're going to rank it at spot 17 simply because it's just not what you'd expect if you watched a Seinfeld episode. The whole first season is kind of not what you'd expect, but this one, it's a very slow-moving story. There's one basic plot line that kind of goes through. Not all the characters are there, and the ones that are there are not fleshed out all the way. So I don't think Elaine's even in this one. There's a few that don't have Kramer. There's a few that don't have Elaine, but this one feels very, very vastly empty. See, a lot of those episodes, like when Jerry and Elaine go to Florida for the first time, there's no George, there's no Kramer, but the story and the characters are so great that it's funny the whole way through. You don't even miss them, really. I mean, it sucks not seeing your favorite characters, but you don't feel that gaping hole like you do in this one. This one, it's a longer episode, and it's a slower moving episode with less content. So, it's just a pilot episode, honestly. They were testing it out. Like I say, I think the whole first season's kind of a pilot season, really, seeing what they had. It's funny. I mean, there's good bits in it, and it's interesting to see kind of George's character evolve from here to where they end up later on. But so Jerry has a female friend that he met coming into town, and, they link up and everything like that. And there are memes about this today, which I think are hilarious. So he's, planning a day for her. He's trying to figure out if she's interested in all this. And then at some point throughout the episode, she just goes, Yeah, let me just call my boyfriend real quick, and then he makes his face where he looks off screen, and it's just like there it is, the disgust face, that like, God, boyfriend, really? I did all this, and like I said, there are memes on TikTok and Instagram Reels about this all the time. So I mean, it's just one of those, like I say, relatable jokes. It stands the test of time. Most of Seinfeld is, and even if like the actual subject matter isn't exactly what you can like one for one kind of parallel to today, you can kind of squeeze it and make things say like, okay, instead of my fourth spot at the coffee shop, it's my fourth spot in like the squad on Xbox or whatever, and there's just all kinds of little parallels like that you can draw between social dynamics, which I think is just a genius show. And you can just sit there and laugh at it, but also if you really think about it, you're like, there's actually a lot going on here, But yeah, that was number 17. We had the Seinfeld Chronicles. Pretty easy put there, honestly, because if you watch them in order, you'll see it's a very different. The coffee shop's all different. The apartment looks different. Everything about it is just kind of it's piloty. It's you don't put a lot of effort into the surroundings of the show. You put a lot of effort into the script and the direction the show is going to go in, and you can see the groundwork there. You can see the foundation. But we're solid 17 right there. All right, at spot 16, we have The Jacket. So The Jacket is an episode where Jerry buys a very expensive jacket, like a very expensive jacket, especially for the times. It's like a suede outer jacket. It's very sleek. It's very nice. The weird thing is the inside is this bright candy stripe, like pink and white jacket lining. So it's this weird, dichotomy here where you have this like tough, sleek outside, and then this very like bright candy inside. Kramer's in the beginning. He's asking how much the jacket was. Jerry alludes to it being very expensive. So he doesn't want to damage the jacket, of course, in the weather. Now there's some weather outside. And all this is important because as the episode progresses, you'll see there's so many like tiebacks inside this episode. Now it's a very standalone episode. It's not like later on episodes where there's a lot of callbacks and a lot of jokes that kind of keep on moving the series forward or story arcs or anything like that. But in the actual episode, there's very like micro arcs and things like that and parallels being drawn. So the jacket, like I say, tough, sleek exterior, very bright candy inside. They go to the hotel, Jerry and George, to meet Elaine and Elaine's father for dinner. So he gets in there. He has to turn his jacket inside out because there's some weather outside. He doesn't want to ruin the suede. When he sits down with the father, him and George realize that father is very stern, like a war veteran, a writer, super traditional, a lot of ideals. Set in stone. Nobody's changing it, The small talk they try to create with him, it's very uncomfortable. Instead of breaking the ice, it just kind of freezes things over a little more. So the reason I have it at 16 is because it's basically centered around George and Jerry being in one uncomfortable situation the whole time. And for me, it's so relatable on a couple of different levels, where I've been like at a friend's house and I'm waiting for them to get ready and I'm just sitting there with their parents. And, I don't know how to talk to a parent when I'm younger. I mean, they're obviously not like teenagers or anything like that, but they, George and Jerry were still 40 years younger than the father and, did not have the same life experiences. So, trying to relate to somebody that's in a completely different world from you is a very tough thing to do. And so I think we've all been there before. And it just makes things, fairly uncomfortable throughout the episode. There are some very funny moments there, though, where, Jerry runs to the bathroom and then George is like, oh, let me come with you. And the father's just the look of disappointment he gives and stuff like that. It's just, it's a different time, and it's very funny how they parallel like more, forward-thinking values and traditional values. And they don't say one's right or wrong, which I love. I think it's nice to give both sides, and I think it's nice to explore both sides and see how they kind of like interact and coexist. And this is just a great way where new and old kind of meet. But it also reminds me of the jacket itself. And this is where I say they draw some interesting parallels, where the jacket has like a new, brighter inside and then an old, like, sleeker outside, where they just kind of come together, and it's like, well, this is a more traditional and this is a new age kind of thing. And it culminates at the end where Elaine finally shows up. They're like, hey, sorry I'm late, this and that, whatever, work or traffic, something held her up. It's snowing outside. Jerry has to flip his, like, jacket inside out so it doesn't get damaged, but he doesn't also want to disappoint the father. So he can't be seen walking down the street with that jacket on inside out, so he flips it back to the way it's supposed to be and ruins the jacket, essentially. So just a lot of unfortunate situations, a lot of cringe. It's hard to sit through some of those parts because it's just so real. The thing about Seinfeld is I love the show, and every episode has value. Like I said before, it's your favorite of your favorite things. So, the jacket episode is not something I can't watch. I enjoy it. It's just not one of my favorites. It's not even close to the top of my list. But it's still good, It's like the James Bond franchise when I was doing that. I love all those movies. I can find value in all those movies. There statistically just has to be a best one, in my opinion, and a worst one. And so the jacket's down at 16 for that reason. It is kind of funny at the end, though, when Kramer just takes the very expensive jacket because it's ruined, and Jerry's like, well, whatever. What are you going to do, So it's just, it's funny, it's interesting, it's weird, and it's one of those where you just get kind of wrapped up in the moment, and it is a little harder to swallow than some of these other episodes in season 1 and 2. So next at 15, we have The Revenge, which is a very interesting plot story. It's kind of the first, before they started getting way out of control with, the scenarios and things that the characters are placed in. The Revenge is a weird one. George is just mad at his boss and tired of all the stuff he has put him through. He quits, and then he's looking for a new job. This is when he was doing his real estate stuff. There is an interesting callback in here, though, when George is fixed up with Elaine's friend later on in the series. But The Revenge is where George pretends like losing his job or quitting his job was a joke. He comes back in, just pretends like, this is a great scene where he just goes back to work and pretends like it was all a misunderstanding. And the boss is like, what is Costanza doing here? Why is he here? Didn't you quit? And he acted like it was a joke or whatever. So either way, George kind of weasels his way back in. He goes out to a company, function at a bar, and he poisons his boss, essentially. Now, it's such a roller coaster at that moment too, because he poisons his boss's drink, and then the boss makes this long speech about how he's happy about everything going on, and he welcomes George back into the group or whatever. So George all of a sudden has a change of heart and is like, oh man, I better stop this. But in that instant, the boss then shifts it into sarcasm and making jokes about George. And so George is in this funny crossroads where he essentially just tells the boss to drink up, because then he gets mad again about, the boss being a dick to him and everything like that. So it's funny how there's this back and forth, power struggle there, whatever, between George's should I do it? Should I not do it? And his acting, Jason Alexander is such a fantastic actor, especially in this series. The subtle movements, the eyes, the mannerisms, everything's so good. I don't love the plot, though. I think the whole boss and the poison thing, I think it's outlandish. I think it's weird. And it feels like it doesn't fit in with Seinfeld for me. A lot of the mishaps are accidental. This is just very, premeditated and calculated, and it's just weird to me. But what saves this episode from being just very hard for me to watch, in my opinion, is then there's the second revenge story between Jerry and Kramer and the laundromat. So Jerry thinks that he lost money or something because he accidentally left it in a laundry bag. He takes it to the laundromat. The guy there, says, whatever's left behind, it's just his property or whatever, because it's left there. Jerry doesn't like that. So Kramer concocts a plan to go down there and fill one of the washing machines with cement. And it is, especially for the first couple of seasons, one of the funniest scenes. I mean, Kramer's acting, Of course, incredible. Of course, goofy. He's struggling with the bag of cement. He's struggling to get in there. He's, coughing and choking on the dust and stuff while Jerry's trying to distract the owner of the laundromat. They end up finding the money in Kramer's bag, but the whole situation, the whole setup was great. It was very funny. So that part of the episode, them two, is so much better and funnier in my opinion than the George and Elaine situation. I don't find it as relatable as other episodes. I find it a little closer to the bottom just because the ones ahead of it there's more relatability, there's more funny, situations the characters are in, and more diverse writing for the characters, I guess. Because there was this real air of tag teaming, set up this character with this character and set up that character with that character, and it's going to be these 2 episodes are going to be about these characters, and these couple episodes are going to be about those characters. So we kind of move away from that later on, and everybody kind of gets their own story, and they weave together sometimes or team up. But this is very much like there's 2 storylines going, and they both kind of fizzle out at the end in a certain way. But Revenge going to sit at number 15 for me. So here at number 14, we have The Statue. It's a hard episode to really digest because it's another one of those early episodes that's just kind of weird and out of place. There are some highlights to the season in this episode, but the rest of it's just kind of tough to sit through, in my opinion. Elaine's doing some publishing and stuff, and she's pretty much had that job almost the whole time she's been in the series. But she has a very stern, kind of difficult client to work with. And that client's boyfriend is the subject of Jerry and his plot line, where he has him clean his house on some, scholarship program, charity thing. I'm not sure. Even looking back at it this day, I'm not even sure how they realistically lined this up. Maybe this was something back then, but he ends up having to clean his house, and he does a great job, and he cleaned a lot, but Jerry accuses him of stealing a statue from his house. This statue is the same statue that George broke a long time ago from his parents' collection of antiques or statues or whatever it was. But it's a very weird plot. It's like I say, it's a strange story to get into, and there's a lot of overacting in this one from the tertiary characters, and it kind of puts me off a little bit. There's a lot of overacting from the boyfriend and from Rava, who is Elaine's client. And, it's the main characters are kind of finding their stride. Kramer is doing his thing, George, Jerry, Elaine. They're all kind of settling into their roles at this point. And it's nice to see them. It's nice to see them doing what they're doing, but they're just, there's a lot of extra being thrown at them. The statue, the highlight to this is when Kramer goes undercover as a detective and goes to steal the statue back. And Michael Richards is a historically fan of detective dramas and things back in the day. After this show, I believe he played a detective, but a Kramer detective, so the show kind of flopped. But this is the role he wanted to play, the role he was excited to play. So he really gives a great performance as the detective. And you can see how just excited he is to play it there. And, it shines through. It's one of those moments where you're like, wow, this is actually, kind of awesome on a few different levels. It's him doing something he wants to do. It helps the story. It's a highlight to the actual show. There were some funny parts in the statue episode. It's not as hard to sit through as the jacket is at times, or the Revenge. And it's not as slow moving as the Seinfeld Chronicles, but overall it's just kind of it's one I never really want to revisit. I occasionally do if I'm watching them in order, but you can kind of skip it if you want to. Statue is definitely not my favorite. I have it at 15 because there are highlights. When I do watch it, I'm like, oh, that's a good part here. That's kind of funny, but really that Kramer scene, if the Kramer scene wasn't in there, this would be probably in the running for my least favorite episode in the actual franchise. Coming in at number 13, we have The Deal. And The Deal is mostly centered around Jerry and Elaine having like this weird friends with benefits kind of relationship thing. And they set up rules and try to make it so that it's not awkward or ruin the relationship. And we see this concept kind of explored later on in the series as well. It's, again, one of those things that a lot of people could probably relate to today. It's something that isn't wildly outlandish, and it is very funny in parts, but also kind of awkward in parts. It's a good overall episode, though. I actually like this episode, even though it's kind of low here. I don't think there's enough like really high points to bring it up to a higher level. 13 is where it sits in the first two seasons, just because it is pretty centered around just Jerry and Elaine. Again, they usually have, people pairing up for the episodes at this point. And you don't get to see a whole lot of, what becomes the highlights of the episodes is, all four of the characters are great. And I love that all four of the characters are great. There's a great energy together. They work well together. But, Kramer and George, of course, the acting highlights of the series and everything like that. And they give just very good comedic relief and, main storylines even as well. So not as focused on them here, but, still easy to get through, still nice to get through. Relatable, like I say. There is a very funny part when it's the birthday, and you can see Jerry's not trying to overdo it because he doesn't want to end up in a relationship with Elaine. And George isn't supposed to make Jerry look bad, so he's supposed to give him her half the value of a birthday present. And it's just hilarious because Jerry gives cash, and she, Elaine's thinking well, who gives cash to a friend for their birthday? That's so weird, And of course, today's age, I'll take cash, whatever, who cares, whatever. But it's more about the sentimental, I guess, to her. And so then George gives literally half the cash value to Elaine, and so he's all upset about that. Meanwhile, Kramer, being Kramer, will come in with this incredible birthday present. It was a bench that she had wanted or mentioned or something, and of course he just absolutely outdid the present, and she was super blown away. So Jerry's all upset that he looks bad in this situation. It's really funny all around. It's a funny situation, but in that moment it all kind of builds to that. And they end up getting in a relationship later on, but it doesn't last, of course. By the next episode, all that's forgotten about. The thing about these first several episodes is that a lot of the plot points get wrapped up, and then you just never really hear about them again. Whereas, like I say, in probably season 4 and on, even season 3, there are some callbacks later on in the series, and I think that kind of really brings it full circle and takes it up a notch for me, is when I can look back and go, oh man, I remember that episode. Yeah, that's funny that they, brought that back or whatever. So this is a good episode. It's not my favorite. It's going to sit here just on the lines of, what I was talking about before. It's just the characters are kind of boxed in, and then George and Kramer get little, essentially smaller bits in the show, and it's not as impactful as they will be later on throughout the series. At number 12, we have The Male Unbonding, and this is, just another one of those weirdly relatable ones where it's not super funny to me. There's some funny bits in there, but there's a lot of hard to watch kind of bits. Not hard to watch in the sense that they're bad, but hard to watch, and I feel like we've all been through this before. And it's a friend that is just very persistent, clingy, always trying to be there, doesn't really respect Jerry's time. And so George is saying, hey, maybe we should end this, a relationship. So George convinces Jerry to try to break up with his longtime childhood friend. And so it's a strange, premise. But, they do a couple of activities together throughout the episode. They go to a Knicks game. They hang out together. And it looks like, okay, so when you hang out with somebody nowadays, it's an event. You do it. It takes it out of you. It's fun, but you're like, when you're home, you're just like, okay, I'm good. When Jerry gets home, he's immediately called and asked, like, hey, when are we doing this again? We got to do more. So it's a lot, and we've all been there where it's just a lot. Meanwhile, Kramer is doing, he's coming up with this is where we first get a taste of Kramer. This is season 1. So, we're still developing the look of the characters. We're still developing the way they act, the way they think and do stuff. Kramer's thinking of a pizza place where you make your own pizza. Now, this is a callback to later on when he does it eventually. But in this one, so that's probably another reason I like this, is because we look back on this episode and think, oh, yeah, that's where that came from, But it wasn't the way you would normally expect Kramer's ideas to come off. His acting was very Kramer, though. And like I say, the development, the movements, when Jerry shoots down the idea and says it's dumb, just the way Kramer acts is so hilarious to me, and like his movements and things. It's the stuff that's emulated throughout, parodies and whatnot of this show. So it's got a lot of high points, a lot of like I say, relatable material. It's one I used to not like watching, but now whenever it's on or whenever I see it again, I kind of, the tough parts to watch I don't mind as much, and the cringe parts are a little more funny to me now than they were before. So overall it's a pretty solid episode, especially for season 1. It's got some highlights for a season 1. I know it's second on the list for season 1, and there's 3 others, but I think if there was a bunch of other episodes for season 1, I think it would probably be a standout. But there's only 5 episodes on season 1, so it's kind of tough to say any of them really do stand out. But I got the Male Unbonding there. And at 11, we have the Stakeout. So the Stakeout is an episode centered around Jerry meeting a woman at a birthday party, and he needs to find where she works and try to like manufacture a coincidental meeting to bump into her and go, oh, wow, I can't believe I met you here at the place you work. So it's kind of like funny, and also like, kind of like it's stupid funny, but it's interesting how it all plays out. So essentially they meet at a birthday party that Elaine takes Jerry to, and Jerry's going just to kind of be, the essentially somebody to talk to or just be with while they're at this, birthday party. Because if you ever have gone to a birthday or any kind of social event, if you're going by yourself, you can usually bounce off a couple other people and have conversations. But if somebody goes with somebody, there's a dedicated, guaranteed person to talk to like the whole night. So, that was the idea. Now, Jerry ignores Elaine for most of the night, is not listening, is frustrating Elaine to talk to this woman, Vanessa, that he meets there. There's really fun banter between them. It's funny, it's witty, it's interesting. I like to see like Jerry's kind of like personality come out a little more in this. Historically, and they make fun of this later on, Jerry is not a fantastic actor in this show, especially the beginning. He's very like wooden, and this, you can see where he naturally, like, especially the comedy parts, where he naturally kind of shines through a little more. So this is good right here. And to be fair, the way the show ends, you can see the whole lineage of Jerry's acting. Like, it's not traditionally good acting, but, it works for the show, especially with all the strong actors around him. So him and George have a really good scene together while they're waiting and doing the stakeout. Now, the whole reason they're at the place where Vanessa works to meet her is to basically, like I say, manufacture a coincidental meeting and bump into her. George is using the cover story. They devised this plan, though, with Jerry's parents, who make their first appearance in the series. Ellen is, the original actor, but then Jerry's father, Morty, is actually played by a different actor, which is interesting. Throughout the show, they use different actors to play different people. George's dad was originally somebody different, and then they got Jerry Stiller in there to play Frank Costanza. But also, there's a couple of, people they date throughout the show that kind of mix in, and Lloyd Braun is a great example. He's a completely different guy later on when they reintroduce his character in. So they'd have no problem, pulling a Doctor Who or a James Bond where they just kind of switch characters. But, it's not the main characters, of course, so I guess it's not as noticeable, especially back in the day, the 90s, you didn't really have the IMDb's or whatever to, hey, is that the same guy that played that? Or can I look this up on my phone real quick? So it was a lot easier to get away with, I guess, back in the day. But anyway, they devised the plan. George and Jerry happen to go down to the place where Vanessa works to bump into her. And this is where Art Vandelay and the cover stories and the personality of George starts to take shape. So that is all formed here. Classic callback, classic scene. It's another, just witty banter, fun moment that they have together in the law firm office building. And, it just kind of, the story kind of develops from there. A lot of good moments, a lot of funny stuff. It's going to sit here at an 11 just because there's no real, standout highlights, but there's no real lowlights either. It's a fun episode to watch. I think the interesting thing about season 1 and 2 is that if I'm watching season 1 and 2, there are some good episodes that I don't mind watching that I really enjoy, and this is one of them. But if you look at season 3 and 4 and beyond, most of those episodes are going to be the ones on my priority to watch before anything in season 1 and 2. There's just a lot of development, and I'm glad the network stuck with it. It was a popular show, but it didn't really blow up until season 4. So, I'm glad that we got through the growing pains and made it to the show we all love, or at least I love. But yeah, that's number 11, The Stakeout. All right, so here at number 10, we have The Busboy. That episode is the last episode in season 2. So you can really see where they have taken the characters, they've molded them into what they, we now know them as. And there's a lot of little, they pair people up again, but it's paired up in a way where everybody kind of has different stories branch off from there. So Jerry, George, and Elaine are at a restaurant, and the busboy there accidentally catches a menu on fire. George, stomps the fire out, kind of saves the day, quote unquote. And the owner of the restaurant, or the manager, comes over and asks what happened. George explains it and then jokingly says, oh yeah, you should probably let him go or something like that, about the busboy. And then he goes over to the busboy, the manager does, and fires him on the spot. And then George feels really bad, really guilty about it. There's that conscience of George coming in again, He's either heartless or cares too much, which is funny to me because I think depending on situations, a lot of people are like that. It's like, well, I don't care about this thing. But then I look at something else and I'm like, oh man, I feel bad about that. So it's just one of those dichotomy of the human that is George Costanza. And I guess paralleling to Larry David is very funny. But yeah, so George and Kramer decide to go to the busboy's house to apologize. It's funny because the busboy is very stern and, upset about everything. The acting's great, of course. And Kramer leaves the door open so the busboy's cat runs away too. So this is where the stories kind of diverge because George was feeling bad about getting the busboy fired. Then Kramer doesn't really care that much, to be fair, but lets the cat escape, and then they have to look for the cat, and it's just one comedy of errors after another. The scene in the actual house was hilarious. Kramer was, bumbling around and not really taking the hints of the gravity of the situation. George is trying to make amends. It's absolutely hilarious how all this stuff goes. Yeah, and I think there's this part where Elaine is joking and saying she's never going to eat at the restaurant again or something. One of those innocent jokes, but it goes over the manager's head, and so she feels upset about getting him fired too. But it's just like I say, it's just one thing after another there, and that's why it feels very much like a more modern episode than the earlier pilot-y kind of seasons. Elaine is trying desperately to break up with her boyfriend and get him out of the air. I think she meets the guy in Seattle or something. She's on a business trip. And he ends up just being just a, somebody she is not interested in at all. And they re-explore this concept later on as well. But, she's trying to get him out of there as fast as possible. She has this great scene where she's kind of describing how she was driving and stuff. And I believe it's a callback to an actual movie, too, which is something else I like that Seinfeld does, is they pay tribute to a lot of movies and music and things like that. A lot of the actors, favorite shows and writers' favorite shows and movies and things. And so I think it's really cool they have that scene there as well for her. And so the end of it happens to all culminate in Jerry's apartment, as most of them do. The busboy comes in, and he tells George, you think he's going to, destroy George. He looks upset, but he thanks him because there was like a gas leak or something at the restaurant. It exploded, and the busboy's life was spared because he was fired. But he says, because you were such an idiot that day or something, rude remark or something funny that kind of is like a jab at him, but also like a thank you. So that's a subtle little funny joke. And then, the cat comes back. So it's a happy-ish ending, but then, that boyfriend and the busboy end up having like a fight or something, and then Lane's stuck taking care of the boyfriend for a while. It's just a sad, cringy, kind of upsetting way that the show ends, which most of them do end that way, but you can tell that the writing has kind of come full circle, and they know the characters, they know the stories, they're going to deliver them in the way we know them, season 3 and really season 4 and on. But yeah, Busboy's sitting there. It's a solid episode, definitely a solid episode. At number 9, we have the stock tip. Now, the stock tip is the last episode in season 1. So, it's one of those older ones. It's very dry compared to the rest of the series. It's pretty funny, though, because, again, with how, cryptocurrency is and how hot the stock market has been and is, especially now where, for a while people were, streaming it, and there's a lot of videos being made on stock tips and things like that. So this is, again, very highly, I guess relatable this day and age, where George invests money he got from a stock, an insider, and he convinces Jerry to invest as well. It's not going well. It's down every single day, and Jerry's freaking out about it. He's upset about it. George is going down with the ship, though. There's so many good parts where, you'll see Jerry asking George what's going on. George can't get a hold of the guy because he's in the hospital now. He got thrown out of the hospital then. It turns out a lot of people don't like the guy that gave George the tip, so Jerry starts freaking out. Just a whole lot of different, very funny interactions and things between everybody. George has some very memorable moments. When he's talking about going down with the ship, you can really see his acting and his character coming out. I love George. George is, it's hard to choose a favorite because I love all the characters, but George is definitely, his subtleties, his movements, everything he does is so funny. And I really like him in this. It's also, like I say, the first episode in the show, I guess, where every character kind of has a little bit more to do. Elaine's not as prominent in this one as she could be. Kramer doesn't have a ton of role either, but you're starting to see them all branch out a little bit more and not necessarily depend on each other as much. Again, people are paired up, but that's just kind of how it is the first few seasons. So as George and Jerry are struggling with the stock, Kramer, every time it goes down, is just trolling them, just laughing at them. He likes to bring the newspaper over and show Jerry what the stock's doing. I think that's hilarious. It's so rude, but it's so funny. And the way they play it again, Jerry's like, why do you find this so amusing? Why do you find my misery so funny? And, it's just, there's so many different things that just come up throughout this episode that, again, are so relatable, just the way people act and interact and when things are going bad versus good. Now, the big, kind of tough moment in this one that keeps it from being higher, in my opinion, is when Jerry and Vanessa from the Stakeout, goes out to like a retreat in, I think, Vermont or somewhere, at like a bed and breakfast. They have absolutely nothing to talk about, nothing to do. And, they were warning, I think George warned Jerry, like, oh, these trips are death sentences to relationships, especially this early on. And Jerry said, no, we're going to be fine. So they're joking around before they take the trip, and everything's great, good chemistry. They get into the trip, it's raining, they can't do anything outside, they're inside all day. In the 90s, if you're inside all day, there is practically nothing to do, especially for two adults at a bed and breakfast. So they just sit there awkwardly the whole time. It's hard to watch. It's tough. And, again, we've all been in situations like that where we're like, geez, how soon can the end of this interaction come? And, it's a good episode again. Like I say, I like watching it. I think it's interesting. I think it's fun to see, especially old Seinfeld compared to like the newer, I say newer episodes are freaking, 25 years old at this point, but, the newer-ish episodes, and how the characters kind of developed from where they were. It's a great one, though, it's a great one for season 1 and 2. We're getting towards the upper half now. Not a whole lot to say about the bottom half other than they were figuring it out. The episodes themselves kind of moved a little slower than I would like in my Seinfeld episodes, but not too fast either, because there's some that move very quick. But yeah, the top half of this list, the next 8 or so, 8 parts, they're very, very good. I like these a lot. At number 8, we have The Robbery. And this one's a pretty straightforward episode that centers around Jerry needing a new apartment or wanting a new apartment. And, the building's had some break-ins. There's some stuff that has happened in and around the apartment. Jerry gets robbed. And I want to say Kramer left the door open or something like that led to it. But it's a very good episode because it centers around all the characters together. It shows them kind of playing off of each other. It's got a good involvement from everybody. George is a real estate agent at this point too, so he takes Jerry to see this wonderful apartment. Everybody loves it. Everybody thinks he should get it. And so it's just kind of them figuring out, essentially towards the end, who should get the apartment. Then none of them get the apartment. But they give the apartment to somebody else and they regret it. The whole episode itself moves pretty smoothly. It's pretty fun and easy to watch. There's no real hard to watch or cringe moments in there either. So if you're a fan of just watching something, it's a good show. There's no real highlights or lowlights. But for the first couple of seasons, there's these really tough to watch parts sometimes and really great parts that kind of balance out. This one's more just, it fits exactly in the middle because that's just the kind of episode it is. It's just kind of a right in the middle. But when they're in the apartment looking around, that's a pretty good moment. I like some of the subtleties again that the characters do. I like watching them kind of interact with each other, especially early on. And this showcased a lot of that, So not a whole lot to really say about it. That's pretty much the whole plot right there. But it just shows kind of their relationship, their friendship, and how the characters kind of develop. It's more of a building block show than anything, really, with some funny parts in it. So I think for me personally, it's up here, kind of in the middle. I think for the casual fan, or for a lot of people, really, I guess not even the casual fan, really a lot of people, it'd probably be a little lower in the their rankings, just because there's no real standout moments or anything like that. But I just like it. I think it's just nice and mellow all the way through. So it's kind of fun and easy to get through. So at number 7, we were just sitting at number 8 with The Robbery, how it's nice and mellow all the way through, nice and kind of even tone. Number 7 is the exact opposite. It is a wild ride, and it's definitely season 2 where they're showing what the writers can do. Oh man, it is just absolutely wild. So the baby shower centers around so many different things. There's this woman who is having a baby that George used to date. George is trying to get revenge on her, or, trying to make her feel bad about embarrassing him at an art thing they were doing, getting chocolate sauce all over his nice red shirt, which is very important. This is what I like about this episode. Even though there are bits that are kind of tough to like get through, most of it, there's just so many hilarious moments that happen here. And when they are at the baby shower itself, there's just a lot of different things that happen, a lot of different situations the characters are placed in. The baby shower takes place in Jerry's apartment. Elaine is for some reason trying to like get on the woman giving birth's like good side, and so doing all kinds of things for a friend that doesn't really care much about Elaine, thinks she's very, so much better than Elaine and stuff like this. But this woman that has the baby is getting, her way every time she does anything. So there's so much going on in this episode, but Elaine wants to have the baby shower at Jerry's apartment because it's big, it's got space, she can put the, baby shower together there. Of course, the person having the baby is just scoffing at everything. The people that are there, just kind of there. This secondary plot, though, where Kramer is, talking Jerry into getting illegal cable like he has, and he has a couple of guys come and install it for, whatever price it is. But those guys are like some, tougher, shady kind of people that are installing the free cable, of course. And so Jerry has this dream about him getting like, shot by the police, and it's the cable boy scene. If you haven't seen it, it's hilarious. It's such a great scene, and just a sea of good moments in this episode. It's one that you really got to pay attention to also. Like, I could watch this one a couple of times and still get something new each time. So, of course that comes together. Elaine's trying to have a baby shower. The cable guys are coming over when that's happening. They're making everything awkward and weird. Elaine's upset about that. George picks up Jerry. And now we know George doesn't just do things for free. He's a very cheap guy. He's a very petty guy. So Jerry's like, I can't believe you decided to pick me up from the airport. Like, that's so nice of you. And so he had already told the story to Jerry and Elaine and everybody about what had happened with the red shirt and everything. So George is like, hey, yeah, maybe we could hang out after. I'd come upstairs, and then, Jerry says, well, Elaine's got the baby shower. And he goes, don't worry. It'll be fine. I'm good with, baby showers or whatever. And Jerry's like, that's kind of strange. And then he looks over and he's like, wait a minute, you have the red shirt on. And then George is wearing the red shirt with the chocolate stain to then, use it as evidence and revenge fodder for the person that had done that to him years before with the, that was giving birth, having the baby at the baby shower. So it's just a whole lot of different plot coming together all at one. It converges there. There's so many great scenes, so much good acting, so many funny bits and memorable moments in here. I love it. I love this episode. Like I say, I think that the top half and the bottom half are such a separated wide margin. This one is just, it's so good. There are some tough parts to get through and some parts that are like really cringy, but that's Seinfeld. I mean, it is just a show about nothing, a show about cringe, and a show about relatable situations. So yeah, I really like this one. The baby shower is definitely worth watching. If you don't watch the whole first couple of episodes or seasons, this one is one you got to see. At number 6, we have the pony remark. It is a solid episode all the way through. There's some funny bits, a lot of like back and forth, should I do this or should I do that kind of struggle with Jerry going to the softball game or the funeral of his relative. He made a remark to that relative about hating ponies and things like that. And she, people with ponies and people that get ponies are spoiled and this and that. And so she gets really upset about that at a family function. Now, Jerry and his whole family were there. Elaine was there. And it's just so funny because he's doing his little act thing at the table, trying to make people laugh and this and that. And then he just ends up offending everybody. And, just the look of disgust on everybody's face is so hilarious. And, again, it's one of those cringy moments for sure. And a lot of them are tougher to get through kind of these earlier episodes. But this one's done really well. It's one of those things where like we've seen this kind of happen in person. I'm sure we've seen people kind of crash and burn like this at family functions or just gatherings in general. But it's not a particularly like hilarious episode, but there are subtleties that kind of stick with you, and I love that. It also is a great character developing episode where Kramer is trying to build levels in his apartment. So it comes back to the casting and pilot episode of the show they end up putting on in season 4. So it's another one where I love the callbacks, of course. I love the subtleties, and this episode is kind of filled with them. So it might not be everybody's favorite, but it is one of those classic episodes where you can kind of look at it and go, "Oh, I remember this part. Yeah, this is wild." But yeah, Pony Remark is it's just funny the way every character interacts. There's a lot of characters involved here. Doesn't center around all the characters together, though. It's mostly just a Jerry story, and everybody kind of fits in, here and there. Ironic things happen, of course. People are, again, there's, hey, who gets the apartment? Who gets this and that? With the death and some insensitive stuff there. And then there's also hey, well, it's my championship softball game, so I don't know if I can go to the funeral. And the parents are disappointed in Jerry. It's just so, it just reminds me of all those things. Like, there's things we have to do in life, and there's things we want to do in life, and they usually conflict. And so it's kind of a good metaphor for life as well. So I like this episode a lot for a lot of different reasons. Definitely worth a watch. So here at number 5, we have a very overlooked episode. The Apartment is a great, great episode. And I think there's a few really standout classic episodes in season 2. But The Apartment, I think, just gets overlooked because it's very good. It just, I don't know if it has those incredibly standout moments like some of the other ones do. It's funny all the way through. It's a great, great episode. This one centers around Elaine potentially moving into Jerry's building right above him. And, Jerry's excited at first, and then the more he talks about it with like Kramer, the more he realizes, man, this might be a mistake. I already have one very intrusive neighbor. If I have another friend living here, she'll know what I'm doing, when I'm doing. She'll come over all the time, and just, it's like one of those, the grass is always greener kind of thing, It's like a great idea, and then the reality of it sets in. So, they're going back and forth trying to figure out how to first get her the apartment, then not get her the apartment. Meanwhile, Kramer is having these like seizures every time he hears Entertainment Tonight come on and Mary Hart's voice. And so that, it's not a very huge part of the thing, but later on in the episode, he hears her voice when he goes over to date somebody, and he starts getting like moose all over the place. It's a very funny scene. It's a very random scene, but he doesn't have a ton of involvement, but what he does have in the episode is very good. And then George has a plot where he's with a friend's like apartment party or something like that, and he goes out with the gang to there, and he's wearing like a fake wedding ring to see if it will attract more female attention. And of course it does, but mostly because I believe there's not actually any interest in dating him. And since he has the wedding ring on, I believe that the females that are talking to him are more willing to talk to him because they feel a little more secure around a married man versus somebody who's single. And so he starts talking at the end after he sees how it's working in his mind. And he starts taking it off and saying, "Oh, this isn't real. I'm just wearing this." And then they, of course, discuss the women that he's talking to. But it's just, it's funny. Jason Alexander, just a fantastic actor, and he plays everything so well. There's some, great moments in this episode, especially between Kramer and Jerry. And Jerry, his very, nervous demeanor is always a favorite of mine because, he's such an even keel character most of the time, but when he starts getting a little nervous and frantic, you can really see it on his face. So, that's when the start of a lot of the characters' personalities really shine through, especially in season 2. So I like The Apartment. I like, that just the way it progresses. I think it's a fun one to go through. And at the end, it's kind of hilarious because, Jerry does not end up with Elaine above him as a neighbor. Jerry ends up with a band that is constantly playing loud music and stuff. And so he ends up getting his in the end. And it's It's hilarious. I mean, I just think the way they end these episodes with this like either ironic moment or just disastrous for the crew moment is always funny to me, and that's kind of a staple of the show. So the apartment's where I really see that kind of come through and shine through. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just one of those overlooked gems in season 2. Definitely worth a watch. If every one of these is worth a watch, but the apartment, if you haven't seen it, I would check it out for sure. At number 4, we have the Chinese restaurant, and this is probably the most classic and most, I would say, iconic of the first couple of seasons, and one of the most iconic in the whole franchise. I wouldn't say as relatable today just because of the state of, like DoorDash, eating out, carry out, the internet, planning ahead, all that stuff. But there's definitely some relatable bits in there where George, Jerry, and Elaine are at a restaurant waiting for a table, and it feels like what takes forever to get a table. The whole episode centers around them in this restaurant, which is awesome, first of all, because it's one set, it's one location, yet they squeeze so much out of it. They do this a couple of times, too. There's a couple of episodes throughout the series where they do this, and I think it's just genius and groundbreaking and interesting. But it's just hilarious. The interactions they have, they do all the different scenarios where you'd try to get, you would try to get like a table earlier or something. People come in after them, get tables first. George is expecting a phone call. The guy that's taking reservations and things, he will mispronounce George's name, and George has no idea. He tries to call his girlfriend back. Like, there's just so many different things that happen in such a short, like, small area. Jerry is pretending like he can't go hang out with his uncle because he's sick. Meanwhile, somebody his uncle works with spots him at the restaurant. Just every like awful situation you could think of at the restaurant. They try to slip the host money to get the table. The guy doesn't even notice it and just keeps the money, I guess, in the menu or whatever they had. And so Elaine like did the money wrong. It's just the whole comedy of errors. And it's hilarious. Like I say, it's classic. It's iconic. I love this episode. I think it's great. It's a must watch for anybody who wants to get into the series or anybody who has been a fan of the series. It's a great rewatch. Just a classic episode. And again, like, if you've ever been at a restaurant and you're waiting on a table, you could feel the pain. And we've all been there where we go to a place and we're like, they probably aren't that busy. Oh, it's a 30-minute wait. Okay. So, you're sitting there for 30 minutes. Now we have phones and stuff, so it's like not a big deal. But man, imagine just standing around waiting. There's nothing to do. You read, like the things that are on the wall or, a menu. That's what we used to do, I guess, back when we were waiting. We would just have a menu in the lobby and read that, figure out what we wanted. So when we sat down, we were ready to order. But it's so funny. It's just such a great episode. Like I say, iconic. It's in so many best of episodes and things like that. Clips are from this. A lot of great moments. Like I say, George's interactions with the guy on the phone and, with the host, it's just so hilarious. He's such a good actor, especially in this episode. But, I mean, the only reason it's not up at the top is there's zero Kramer at all. And I just think that if you look deeper into the episodes, the next 3, for me personally, are just so great, so funny. But we'll hit those next. At number 3, we have the phone message. So this episode was not received particularly well when it first came out, and I mean, almost doomed the show, actually, from what I understand. I have it pretty high, and it kind of bounces around depending on how I'm feeling. It's one of those where it's like it could be high, it could be low. This last time I watched it, I actually really, really enjoyed it, and I've always, enjoyed it enough, I guess, but the premise is George. There's a couple of iconic lines, and you'll understand what I'm talking about later on, but there's a couple of iconic lines because George goes on a date with somebody. He is asked up for coffee, and apparently that's like a sign that, they're going to hook up, him and the girl. And he thinks coffee's coffee. They have this great discussion, him and Jerry, and it's so good. Such a classic line, and it's there's just a lot of little subtleties on here, and I think that might be why it's not as well received, because it's one of those where you kind of watch it a couple of times, you're like, man, there's so much genius behind like the subtleties of this episode. On the same episode, Jerry is dating a woman that likes a commercial, and he thinks it's ridiculous, and he tells everybody about it. Another great parallel, though, and maybe it's too real. Maybe that's why. But like when you start talking about people behind their back, bad things happen. And so he was talking about her, and she just didn't understand why, it was so fascinating that she liked the commercial. What's the big deal? They got into an argument. Like, I think the big thing about it was it's just so real, And so I bet people didn't really like that at the time, but I think it's funny. And so later on in the episode, George has to go retrieve the tape off of the tape recorder, the answering machine that of the woman he's dating, because he leaves like all these crazy messages, like of him just saying like, hey, yeah, when you said, let's go get coffee, I should have thought about it more. I definitely wanted to get coffee. And then he devolves into this just paranoia and this rant. It's so funny. Like, it's such a typical George thing, just overblow everything. It's not super centric on all the characters. I think it mainly focuses on Jerry and George. And, that's it, not my favorite thing, but I do like that there's a lot of Elaine, a lot of Kramer kind of playing off of, what's going on with everybody. And, there's just, like I say, a lot of little things here and there, a lot of jabs, a lot of, one-liners and quick hits, but it's a very solid, enjoyable episode. Like I say, it fluctuates a lot. It's not a very memorable episode, but when I watch it, I always am just enjoying it from start to finish. I like, there's definitely the typical Seinfeld cringe moments, but, it's pretty good. I like it. So, we'll throw this up here at number 3. It might be my guilty pleasure one in the couple of seasons, but, the next two are definitely not. They are heavy hitters, awesome episodes. So at number 2, we have one that I've gone kind of back and forth on. It's so weird. It's so iconic to me, but also so frustrating to me at the same time. This is the ex-girlfriend episode. So this one, it's where George breaks up with a woman and Jerry gets attracted to her and starts dating her after he's tasked to retrieve some books for George, which is already funny in itself because it's George and he doesn't read. But, they have a really good exchange about that in the coffee shop. Jerry is like, I cannot stand this woman, but she's so attractive and like seductive to me. So there is this great scene where they are, role playing an act that she's like a part-time actor or something. And so she's going to be in this play and she's auditioning for a role. And so they're reading out their lines. Jerry's not taking it seriously, but he's also like, God, this is brutal. Now, the thing that I love about this episode is the chess match, the infamous chess match where it's the brain versus the penis, right? And so Jerry's dressed up. It's so weird. It's so out of place, but it's a callback to another like classic. I believe Woody Allen did this before, and they brought the bit to life. But it's just like, I don't know. There's so many funny things in this episode. It's so iconic. And like I say, it's frustrating me because like there's parts that I absolutely cannot stand, but they're designed to make you feel that. You're supposed to not enjoy being around the ex-girlfriend and, because you want to feel what the characters are feeling. And they do that in such a good job and such a good way that like I actually do not like those parts, but they work because of that, if that makes sense. It's a good episode. It gets across the point. It makes you feel what you want to feel. And it's hilarious. I mean, it's just so funny the way everything kind of comes together towards the end. And the best moment is that the ex-girlfriend Marlene, that Jerry is now dating, does not respect or want to be with Jerry because she saw his act, and then she jokes about his act and how bad it is, and it's just fluff, is the quote. And he can't believe it because she is such a bad actress. And, it's just so funny the way that realization happens. And, Kramer just overreacting with the phone number of the girlfriend because he wants to Jerry wants to break it off, and Kramer won't let him, and it's just there's so many great impactful moments in this episode, and so many good subtle callbacks. I love this episode, even though it's frustrating me in certain parts. I love it. And I got to give the number one spot to the heart attack episode. This one is, so many topics are covered in this one. The characters have so much to do. George thinks he's had a heart attack. He really needs a tonsillectomy. They go to a holistic healer, friend of Kramer, who just got out of jail, and there's, this whole back and forth about, medicine and why it's bad versus the holistic way and why that's good and bad, and both sides, again, make great points, but Jerry goes with them, and he wants to get a whole lot of material for his act, and it's just, you see, like I say, they do a good job in Seinfeld throughout the series to give both perspectives and not overtly make either one look horrible, but, just kind of break down how all of it coexists together. So that's kind of interesting. The ambulance ride is hilarious, where they start, the ambulance attendee and the actual driver start fighting with each other about who took whose candy and stuff like that. And that's a great scene. George is freaking out, of course. He drinks something that the holistic healer gets, and he turns purple. It's just ridiculous, but it's hilarious ridiculous. George is doing, just a phenomenal job of acting again. Elaine brings George some ice cream at the hospital, and you just see him just freak out for that ice cream, and it's so funny, just those little subtleties and things like that. But Kramer and Elaine are not as prominent in this episode as they could be, I guess. They all have roles and they're there, but I think the acting is more stand out from George, and it's more George and Jerry focused, but especially George focused. This one is a heavy George episode, which is why I like it a lot. There's enough of every character. Could I use more? Of course, but get what I can take here with the Seinfeld, and George itself as a written part is so just well written and prominent in this one. I just see this roller coaster, just this up and down that go through each part of the episode with him, and I think it's fascinating to go with that. I think overall this episode is just very funny, and that's why I like it. It's just very funny. I don't have to really think about anything. There's no parts where I'm I kind of can't stand that part, or that part makes me, oof, I feel that one. This one, just all the way through, I'm laughing. And it's another one where I feel like it's kind of overlooked, but there's also some kind of iconic moments in it too. So, it's definitely worth watching. It's worth watching all of season one. It's worth watching the whole series, to be honest. But, especially if you're going to pick and choose what episodes. Number one, the heart attack. I love this episode. It's great. It's very character driven, and it's fun. So that's going to do it for the first and second season Seinfeld episode ranking. We, again, combine them both because there's just not a whole lot of episodes within each season. And, they're very similar, again. It's just the characters kind of developing, the look and feel of the show, and then the writing developing. By the time the busboy happens at the end of season 2, you can kind of feel that they've solidified how the characters are going to act and progress through the show. Jerry looks a little more comfortable in the role, so that's always cool too. But anybody who has, anything different they would do about this list, or any memories for any of the episodes, anything that stands out to them, it's all subjective. Again, we're just talking about our favorite things, the things we love, and the things we, have grown up with or are growing up with even. But I love Seinfeld. I love discussing Seinfeld and just, like I say, a lot of my favorite things with people. It's funny to rank your favorites because it's, where do you put your favorite among your favorite, There are definitely some episodes that, as we talked about and discussed, are not as heavy hitters, but, it's still a classic show, still a show I love watching no matter what. Anyway, we'll discuss something next time. We'll definitely get into the rest of the seasons as we go through the Seinfeld in general and are reminiscing of some great classic TV. But if you have anything you want to see ranked or discussed or talked about, whether it's Seinfeld or some movie franchises or anything we've already talked about to discuss further, please let me know. Always look forward to hearing you. Always look forward to hanging out. Thank you again for everything. I will see you in the next one.